Welcome to my dark little corner of the internet. I work near the trendy Rainy Street area in Austin. You may have heard that people have had strange roofie experiences in the bars in the area. Some people think there's a serial killer at large who has left numerous victims in Lady Bird Lake. Other people have claimed they've been roofied and robbed with no recollection of what happened. Here's what happened to me. I went to one of the bars on Rainy as a send-off for one of my coworkers. There were 9 of us there, 2 of which I knew well and considered friends, my girlfriends Laura and Noelle, while the other 7 I would call work acquaintances. I only knew the guy, Mike, who was leaving, in passing. He worked under a different supervisor, and I'd only seen him occasionally. It didn't really matter. I didn't need much of an excuse to unwind after a long week of project deadlines, so I was happy to be invited. We settled at 2 sets of high tops and were having a good time as the bar got busier and more crowded. After taking a few sips of my 3rd drink, I felt really lightheaded and went to the bathroom towards the back of the bar. There was a line, and as I waited, I remember leaning against the wall and feeling really hot, like I was in a sauna. When I was the last one in the little alcove waiting outside the bathroom, and I remember pressing my head against the wall to stop the spins. That was the last thing I remember from the bar. The next thing I know, I felt pain on my face. There were little rocks digging into my skin as I lifted my head off the ground. I was vaguely aware of someone pulling at my boot, and I screamed into the darkness. A woman was leaning over me, pulling my leg. We both jumped, and she told me to sit up. I didn't recognize her, but she was wearing a tiny dress and very high heels. She told me I didn't belong here, and I needed to go. I had a splitting headache as my eyes adjusted to the darkness. I was sitting against a dumpster, wet trash all around me. The smell was horrible. My purse, my phone, and my jewelry were all gone. Without a word, she helped me up and stood near me as I threw up. Then she steadied me through the alley to the door of a small 24-hour convenience store just a couple of blocks away. I opened the door and went inside, but when I turned around, I saw the woman walking away, without a word. The clerk let me use the phone, and I called my boyfriend, who had been worried sick. I reported all of this to the police, and they recommended I have the exam to make sure I hadn't been assaulted, which, thankfully, I had not been. I don't know why someone would go through all the trouble when they could have just pulled my bag off the back of my chair when I wasn't looking. I'm grateful to the woman who found me and helped me. I was so disoriented. Things could have been a lot worse if someone else had found me in that alley. I don't want to believe she was involved. I don't want to suspect that someone in that bar had put something in my drink and the whole thing went wrong and they stole my stuff to make it look like a robbery. I know most of the Lady Bird Lake victims have been men, so maybe I was collateral damage to who they were intending to roofie? I'll never know. I feel like in a way I was lucky, and I caution people to be safer and more aware than I was that night. There are bad people out there with even worse intentions. As my eyes adjusted to the dimly lit movie theater, I slipped out of my coat and settled in as the trailers played. The theater was empty, which wasn't a big surprise for this late night showing. Just after the movie started, I heard the door to the theater open and heard someone making their way down the aisle behind me. They settled into the seat directly behind me, and I was instantly uncomfortable. Of all the seats they could have picked, why that one? I turned slightly and saw the dark outline of a person wearing a coat and hood. I didn't want to turn all the way around and stare at them, so that was all I could see. After a few moments, I heard them talking, really whispering. I figured I hadn't seen the second person, but when I turned in the other direction to see, there was no second person. This person was whispering to themselves. I tried focusing on the movie, but was thoroughly creeped out. The whispers became louder and more unsettling. When I finally couldn't take it anymore, I got up and turned towards the aisle, but the stranger was gone. I was alone. I couldn't move for a second, and as the movie flashed behind me, I realized I wasn't alone. The person was hiding behind my row of seats, crouched low. I ran to the theater door and tried shoving them open, but they were locked. I couldn't push them open. As I slammed my hand against the door, I heard low laughter and footsteps coming up behind me, and I felt like I was going to throw up. Suddenly, the usher unlocked the doors, and I told him someone had locked me in there with him. A man in a long coat followed me out calmly, explaining he had been on the phone, which he had dropped on the floor. He said I was blowing the whole thing out of proportion. The usher didn't seem to care what was going on and told us to leave as he walked away. As the man in the coat turned to leave, he smiled at me and put his finger to his lips as if to shush me. He leaned towards me suddenly and whispered, "Next time," and walked calmly through the exit doors. I don't know what he meant or what he wanted with me, but it terrifies me to think what could have happened if that usher hadn't been just outside the door to unlock it when he did. When I was 16 and got my driver's license, I would drive to my friend Mira's house whenever I was allowed to use my mom's old car. Usually that was in the evenings when my mom was home. Her only rule was I had to leave enough gas in the tank for her to get to work in the morning. Mira lived about 15 minutes away, so I guess my mom wasn't too worried about me driving alone in our sleepy little suburb. One night on my way back home, I realized I needed to get gas, or my mom would pitch a fit that I'd left her with an empty tank. I didn't know if I'd make it to the big gas station where I usually filled up, so I stopped at one closer to Mira's. It was smaller, not a big name brand place, but big enough to have some self-serve fuel pumps. As I was filling up, a blue car pulled up on the other side of the pump from me, but nobody got out. I thought that was a little weird, but just assumed they were probably getting their card out or whatever. I heard the door open eventually, and a man with a dark gray flannel shirt got out. I could only see the back of his head and that he was wearing a Yankees cap, but he stayed behind the gas station post, so I couldn't see his face. There was nothing unusual about him, nothing that stood out as weird, so I just kept my eyes on my fuel pump as it finished filling. I didn't hear the beeping sounds of his pump, but I wasn't really thinking about why at the time. I turned towards my car to close the fuel door, my back to the man and his car, and that's when I felt him slam against me from behind, his arms wrapped around my neck as he pulled me backwards, my feet dragging on the pavement. I heard a car door open and another set of footprints pounding the pavement towards me. Some primal instinct told me to kick hard against the back of my car and shove backwards into the man. He was knocked off balance when I heard him crack against the concrete post between the two fuel pumps, and his arms gave way just a little. I knew that was my chance, and I broke free, bolting to my driver's side door. One of the men slammed his hand on the back of the trunk as I shut my door and started the car faster than I ever thought possible. I peeled out and saw the lights of their car come on as their engine started. They were following me. Panicking, I called my mom, who sounded sleepy until I told her what happened. She told me to drive to the police station and that she'd find a way to meet me there. I kept looking back in my rear view as they stayed behind me. The police station in my town is a big building adjacent to a park, but you can't see the station from the road. I knew a shortcut around the backside of the park, a little side road that only locals use. When I turned onto the narrow road, the car stopped following me and turned around. That side road I used would be the perfect place to do bad things. It's narrow and tree-lined and not well lit. It creeps me out to think that whoever tried to grab me at the gas station was someone that knew the area, someone that knew there was a police station on the other end of that dark little road. This person was probably a local in my small suburban neighborhood. The Lady Grimm store is open on Etsy. There's a link in the description.